Welcome to One Quick Question with Infomedia, your source for answers to your questions about websites, digital marketing, and more. I'm your host, Carrie Rollwagon. Today's episode is a live One Quick Coffee event. So we are done with our live events this season, but if you have attended a live event or if you sign up for Infomedia's newsletter, you will receive updates on when we start again next season. I've loved to see everybody in person. And then also, if you haven't been able to go to the in-person events, or if you're listening to this and you think you would like to see the slides, you can always head to Infomedia's YouTube channel. So go to YouTube and type in infomedia.com. You have to actually spell out the dot, D-O-T. So that is our handle or our username. And then you can see videos from all of the live events from this season, including this one. So if you like to experience things on audio, you're in the right place. Keep listening in. But if you think, well, maybe I missed something because I didn't get the visual, then we have the visual there for you too. On today's episode, I am going to be actually presenting, so it'll be me talking. We do a deep dive into email marketing. So we talk about newsletters, we talk about how to get people to sign up for your newsletter, whether or not people even read newsletters anymore. Spoiler alert, they do. I talk about a little bit about the terminology of newsletters, but really get into what should your newsletter be about, what should you say, and how should you say it. I also talk about and show you my kind of magic email template that I use to send my personal newsletter, and that has been really, really great and saved me a lot of time. So I hope you love this episode, and I hope to see you next season at One Quick Coffee. So today we are going to talk about building your local reach with email marketing. My name is Carrie Rollwagon. I'm Vice President of Strategic Planning at Infomedia. Is that what you guys are seeing? Okay, yeah, sorry. Usually I can see it out of the corner of my eye, but not today. So that's what I do at Infomedia. And I'm going to talk some about Infomedia's newsletter today. And then we also do newsletters for a lot of our clients. And I also do a project called The Localist, where we also have a podcast that is profiling local business owners. And so I also run a newsletter for myself, which is also kind of localist focused. So today we're going to kind of talk about the spectrum from if you have a bigger company and you're wanting to send that kind of newsletter, or if you have like more of a mom and pop shop or a personal brand or something like that. So we'll be all across the board. This is also me. This is my 90s photo. So Infomedia was started in 1994, which as far as the internet goes is about as old as you get. And so on our site for this month, we've done like 90s-ified all of our photos. So that is my actual teddy bear backpack from high school. I was that girl. So in addition to podcasting and teddy bear backpacks, another thing that I am is an email skeptic. So for years, when I had The Localist and also when I used to own Church Street Coffee and Books, people would say, you need to build up your email list. Yes, technically I had an email list, but I missed a lot of opportunities to add to it because I thought, who cares about email? I don't. I don't feel like I open emails from other companies, and I didn't really believe that anybody else did either. And it wasn't just me that felt this way. A lot of the industry, as far as marketing, really started to skew towards social media for a long time. I think that the time that we really kind of started to pull back from that was a few years ago. I don't know if you remember it. It was my birthday, so I do remember it. But Instagram and Facebook just basically shut down over the whole world for a day. And it wasn't that really hasn't happened to that extent again, but it scared a lot of people. And we started realizing we don't really have control of these contacts. If Instagram or Facebook or social media goes down, that's one thing. But also it could be something not as big as that. It could be that they change their algorithm and suddenly the people who wanted to see your posts can no longer see your posts. Or it could be that your account gets hacked, or you have violated some mysterious rule that they won't tell you what it is, but your account is shut down for a while. And these things Well, and not being to be like scary, and that's not a reason not to be on social media, but these are not rare things. They are just things we have to deal with. And so people started realizing with emails, I have my contacts. Like if you have an email and you want to switch from Gmail to Outlook, you can still use that email address. It works, it's platform agnostic. But if you have a following on Instagram and you want to be on TikTok, you have to build that whole following again. Even if somebody happens to have the same username, you can't take them with you. So people started realizing that this is a really good way to to stay connected to your contacts. So one thing email is good for is just having control of those contacts. So even if you are using social media, which I still think is very beneficial, we should be using social, having an email and a newsletter is really helpful in addition to that. And we also saw this, you probably follow people who suddenly had a newsletter when they didn't have a newsletter before. This is because they want to make sure they have connection to these clients. Email is also really great for building customer loyalty. So this is where I realized I was wrong in thinking that emails wouldn't be good for me. So as I did start a newsletter, spoiler alert, I have a newsletter. There'll be a QR code at the end, please sign up for it. So when I started my newsletter, I found, first of all, that as far as the ratio of number of people have signed up to number of people who actually open and interact with it, that is a much higher ratio than the people who interact with my social media. Also, when I sell a product, which I personally only sell a product maybe twice a year, I'll do a course or a mastermind or a guide or something. I have a guide coming out soon, so sign up for my newsletter and you'll get a link. So I don't do that very often, but when I do it, I find that a lot of those sales, a really disproportionate amount of those sales come from my newsletter list. And part of that is because the people who really like what I have to say probably are signed up for my newsletter, but it has become really good for me. And also it's the thing that people mention when they see me. It's not I'm not buying a coffee and have a barrage of people being like, I love your newsletter. But once or twice a month, which I think is a lot, someone will mention, oh, I love what you said in this newsletter or something like that. And so it is a really good way to just personally connect with people. Also, emails tend to be easier to put together. Originally with social media, we had to have a photo. So we had to learn to be photographers. And then it was we had to learn to be graphic designers, kind of. And now we have to make short films several times a week. That is really hard, unless you're good at it, and not, I'm a more natural writer. I'm not a incredibly visually literate person. So it is just a lot easier for me to put an email together. And yes, you can have images in your newsletter. It depends on what you do though. I'm a writer, I don't have a ton of images in my newsletter, and I don't have to. Infomedia, we design things, we take pictures, we do videos, so we do have a few more images in the newsletter. But also with email, a lot of people have image blockers on anyway, so it just isn't a requirement the way it is for other things. Also, you're not punished for linking off of an email. So when you use Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever, what they really want is for you to stay on Instagram or stay on LinkedIn. You can link off to your website, but if you do that all of the time, they're going to start punishing you for that because they're like, you're sending people away from us and we want people to stay here. Email is not snobby about this. Email doesn't care if you're on email, so you can link to your blog, link to your podcast, whatever you have, which is nice. You can just do that as much as you want. And you can actually write things. If you're writing social media, you kind of have to think, what is going to capture somebody while they're just scrolling down and they're barely paying attention? You can use actual paragraphs in emails. It's crazy. So I do want to go through just a few general terms. This talk is really going to be more about what kind of content you should have in your newsletter and also just the logistics of how to keep creating that content, especially for a small business, because that's my expertise. My background is in communications more than it is in marketing, but I still think there are several things that are helpful to know. So one is a nurture campaign. And a nurturing just means that you're kind of not selling, that you are giving the people reading this email something that they want to see more than something that you want to say. And I would say at least 75% of what you're saying needs to be nurture emails. Even more than that is great, but at least 75%. And you can do that two ways. You can say, I'm gonna send 3 nurture emails and 1 sales email, or you can say in every email, it's gonna be 75% nurturing. You can kind of do that differently. But the reason this works is the same reason it works in person. So if you go up to somebody and every time you go up to them, you're saying like, can you cover my shift? Can you babysit for me? I need a ride somewhere. That person is going to start avoiding you, you know? So we as people say like, how are you? I thought of you when I saw this. I bought you a coffee. And also, can you cover my shift? You know, like, that is how you get somebody to respond in person, and that is also how you get somebody to respond in email. So we really have to think about not just what do we want to say, but what do people actually want to hear. I'm not going to talk too much about drip campaigns, but just because it is the big thing that people talk about, I wanted to cover it a little bit. This is just kind of when you put somebody into like a funnel, and then they get several emails depending on how they respond to that one email. So the gross version of this, I think we've all gotten, is you get an email from some salesperson you've never heard of that's like, hey, I'd love to send you a coffee card or something. And then by the 5th email, they're like, how dare you ghost me or something. You know, it's like they're trying to get more dramatic as it goes on. And if you're a salesperson, to some extent, you do have to probably play around with this strategy. But if you're not in sales and you're marketing your business, you can still use a drip email campaign, but it doesn't have to feel gross, you know? Like, one way we use this at Infomedia, we realized that we have a lot of free stuff that we give our clients. But most of our clients didn't know that until they were like Infomedia clients for a year. So we send them a drip campaign now when they come on board that says, hey, did you know we have these free One Quick Coffee events? Did you know we have a free newsletter? And here's like a tip that you'll, just from us, and here's our free training center. So we're not trying to sell people more stuff. Every once in a while, we will talk about a product that maybe is an upsell, but most of this is just stuff that we're already doing and we want to let our clients know. So drip campaigns can be useful. And then there's the newsletter and email list, which that is a lot of what I'm going to focus on today, but a lot of these concepts will apply to any emails that you're sending out. But it is important and helpful for our businesses to start a newsletter, an email, and then start some kind of regular communication. You can call it a newsletter, you can call it whatever you want. But that's all I mean by that is just maybe you're sending it once a week or once a month, but you just regularly send this to your contact list. And I think the place we want to start here is what should we say? So if you've been to one of my talks before, I like to start with like, what are our goals and how do we want to express what we're saying, and not the mechanics of email or whatever it is. Because a lot of times that's where we start. We're like, okay, what platform should I be on? How often am I going to send this? Like, I'm setting up a complicated campaign. And then we get so much in the weeds with that what we're saying is an afterthought. And that doesn't work because then we're not connecting with people. So it is really helpful to first think about what should we say? And what we should say is what people want to read, not what we want to talk about. Well, actually both, but we need to think first about what people want to read. So, and again, this is counterintuitive because say we're wanting to sell something, like Christmas stockings or something. Like that's what we do. Well, you want to just send an email saying like, buy this, buy it now. Don't wait till Christmas. I need some revenue. Like that's where we're coming from, right? So if you just send an email saying like, you can buy this, or even this is on sale, will that work? Maybe. But what would be better is like 5 ways you could prepare for Christmas now. And maybe 4 of those are just free tips. And then 1 of them is order your custom Christmas stockings, So that way, either way, people may open the email, they may buy the stocking. But with the free tips, they're a lot more likely to open your next email because they know there's something in it for them. And so we should always be structuring this. Yes, what do we need to do as a business? We want to move product, or we want people to read what we're doing, or whatever it is. But then we need to twist that, basically look at it from the other side, and what would people want to actually, like, what do they want to see? So there are a million different ideas for what you can write about. I do think it's nice to have some kind of structure about what your emails, like, tend to include, just because it makes it easier for you. Like, so for example, you can pick one of these and just say, this is what I'm gonna do. You can rotate and do different ones, or you can also just incorporate multiple into the same newsletter. And this is not, we're not limited here. These are just a lot of ideas that you could use and say, like, okay, I feel like I could come up with this. I feel like people would wanna know this. So for Infomedia, our newsletter is a little bit longer and it comes out once a month. So we do kind of a combo of these things. Our newsletter always has tips and tricks. It always has examples of our work, links to our blogs and podcasts, and then also we mention an upsell in that. But we really always do, I'm looking at Anna because she writes the newsletter, good job. So, sorry, don't look at Anna, she will hate that. Too late. But we always say, like, this is what's going on in our field right now, because we know that and our clients want to know that. So we're always saying, if you open an email from us, you're going to see the thing that you need to know this month. And it's not going to be a long thing that you have to wade through. You know that we've looked at it, we've figured it out, and we've, like, shared something. So you're always going to get that. And then you may get an example of our work. You may see some blogs and other things that we do for free. But one thing that I like to do is I try to always have something that you get just from opening the email. I don't think it's wise to just say for every single thing you have to click away, because even though a click is not really costing somebody something, it is like, it feels like work to us. What a world. But like, so yes, we don't always want to be selling, but we don't always want to say that in order to get anything out of this email, you have to click away from this email. So I try to always have at least a paragraph of something that somebody gets just from opening this, so that the next time and the time after that, they're going to want to open it again. And then for my newsletter, I tend to do just tips and tricks. I don't do a whole lot of this. My newsletter is basically tips for small businesses and tips on, like, life hacking, organization type of stuff. And so that I do one topic every week, and then I will promote something that I'm doing, but that promotion is at the bottom. It's just kind of a side note. It's not the theme of the email. Okay, so once you've figured out what to say, how should you say it? I wanted to share the email template that I use. It's from this book, Marketing Made Simple. They don't pay me. I just stole their idea. This is from the StoryBrand universe, if you're a StoryBrand person. But they have an email template. They have several email templates in this book. If you do get this book, I think it's better to just, like, it's more of like an index and find what you need. It's not very interesting if you do a front to back read. Sorry, you guys on the cover. But it does have some good templates in it. I'm also going to send a more detailed version of the template in my newsletter next week, so sign up for my newsletter. But I wanted to walk through it here also. And the thing is, I'm a writer, and so I was very, like, adverse to the idea of using a template. I'm like, I know how to write. I don't need a template to write. But my boss was, like, real into StoryBrand. So I did this almost to prove a point. And I found that when I took what I wanted to say and adapted the template to work with what I wanted to say, I came up with a product that honestly was about the same, but it's a lot easier to produce because I'm not starting with a blank sheet of paper, or metaphorically, every single time. I'm starting with a format. So here's the format. So first start with a clear title. That's your subject line. That's not where that's pointing, but we're going to pretend. So that is the title, or the subject line is the first thing that people are going to interact with. And if that's not good, it's the only thing they're going to interact with. So we want to be clear in the title. And then we state a problem. I can't read this here, so I can't read it to you. But in this example, I start off by saying, basically, do you feel like you're on a hamster wheel at work? Do you feel like you're not meeting your personal goals? So that's the problem. So I'm already starting off with something that probably most people can relate to at some point. And then I deliver the strategic tip or value, and they do say that if you can use like 3 points, that is helpful. So the strategic tip I'm talking about there is that I have this book that I bought at Little Professor. And in this book are 3 questions you should ask yourself every day at work that kind of show you that you are making progress on your goals. And then I link to a template that is basically just a spreadsheet with those 3 questions. So I'm not saying, my strategic tip is not buy this entire book and read this whole book. My strategic tip is, here is a good idea from the book, and here are the 3 questions that you should answer. And then I do break it into 3 points about things that this tip will do for you. And then when you're saying position yourself as the guide, I say there, I've read this book, I did this practice where I answer these 3 questions every day, and I did feel more connected that, okay, yes, I am getting where I want to go with my goals. So it's not complicated, but that format does force me to always think of the subject first, like think of the person, the audience first. So stating the problem is always going to be a problem for them. And this doesn't come naturally to us, because if I was telling somebody about this, I would just say, oh, I read this book and I found these 3 questions and it was really helpful to me. But that's all about me, and that's not what we want for our audience. So it does help you to structure it the way that your audience is going to connect with it better. And then I just, a lot of times will link to a podcast or something else, and then I let them know that I have a product to sell. Now, I don't sell products very much. So in this case, it was come to this event. But again, you're still promoting the things you want to promote, but it's at the bottom of the email, or it can be in the middle of the email, but it's not the whole point of the email. You still got something out of it before you got to me talking about myself, basically. I'm not going to talk a ton about subject lines because they're changing a lot. Email security is getting a lot tighter, and now ChatGPT and other AI are also writing those things, so there is some stuff that is changing. But here are things that I think are just general best practices. Keep it short. If you're using a platform like MailChimp or Constant Contact, they will tell you, this is too long. Listen to them. And keep it quippy but not spammy. So I know this is kind of hard, but it is good to be a little bit casual usually, and sometimes a little bit clever in the subject line, but you don't want to say super free, download, whatever. It just sounds like it's spam. So I know that's pretty vague, but just try not to sound like it's a robot or it's spam. You will have to experiment with what works for your audience, because this does, different personalities kind of respond differently to subject lines. So kind of see what works. Actually pay attention to that. Review your subject lines sometimes and compare them to the open rates. That can be really helpful. I would say limit emojis to 1. And this is also going to depend on the kind of thing that you're doing. If you're selling accessories to tween girls, I'm not sure email should be your primary marketing anyway, but either way, you could probably use several emojis. If you're a financial planner, probably not, money bags or something. Finally, you could use all those money emojis. But for most of us, 1 emoji is kind of fun. It kind of lends a little personality. Going wild on the emojis is just going to make you look spammy. And I would be very, very careful with AI-generated subject lines. Now, I think it's fine to use AI to generate some ideas for subject lines, because we all hate I don't know if we all hate subject lines. I do. Every writer I've ever met hates subject lines. But I wouldn't take it directly from AI. I would change it up a little bit, because email security is, again, getting tighter. It's getting better at recognizing things that are generated by spam or generated by robots. And so you don't want to take something that was written by a robot and immediately throw it into there. They're pretty good at recognizing it. So at least change a couple words and give it a human touch. Okay, so if you're listening, you're like, this is all great, but I don't really have an email list, or you did what I did, which is barely have an email list, and you need to grow it. First of all, just make sure that you're collecting emails at all the natural points you could collect emails. This is going to be different depending on your business. But for example, if you have an online store, make sure you have that little check mark that's like, you can get emails from us, which somehow it doesn't matter if you check it or not, you get the emails, but whatever. Make sure your email is, your newsletter is not your email address, but that the sign up to your newsletter is linked on your social media. Like, you can do it in the bio or you can do it in a link tree. It doesn't matter that much, but make sure people can find it easily. That's also so that when you talk to people or you're talking to a client, you can say, find my newsletter. Oh, it's linked in my social. That's a pretty easy way for them to find it and remember later. In person, like if you have a point of sale, if you have a window, it's good to have a QR code where people can sign up and to tell them a benefit they're going to get. Don't do it's signage. It doesn't need to be extensive, but just join our newsletter for discounts is fine. But just let people know they're getting something out of this. And then when you have a talk or an event, definitely mention ad nauseum that you have a newsletter like I do that you can sign up for. But we'll also have a QR code at the end where you can sign up. So just every time you do an event like that, make sure that you are taking the opportunity and that you give people the time to sign up. None of these are going to result in floods of people joining your email list, but it is good to make sure that you have these points covered. Also keep in mind that building this list is a long game. You can do things that will bring more clients or more subscribers in mass, but typically it is going to be more like you're going to get 2 to 5 subscribers and then you're going to lose 2, and then you're going to get a few more and then you're going to lose some. So this is just kind of like the way the game is played. And a marketer I know told me that she looks at unsubscribes as meaning you're refining your audience. And I do like that just because MailChimp especially will basically give you flashing red lights, like you lost someone. And then really small, it's 5 gained. And I'm just like, what are you doing? Anyway, but just tell yourself, unsubscribes mean you're refining your audience. And also, it's not good to take it personally because some people are unsubscribing because they don't like your content. And if you get a big unsubscribe out of something, you should pay attention to that. But a lot of people just like inbox zero, or there's something else going on, or they see your content already on social. This isn't necessarily a personal attack. I'm talking to myself here. But offering people good content that they actually want is the best way to keep them. So if you are starting with nothing, or if you're starting with a small email list, or just if you want to get more signups, a lead generator is a good way to do that. And a lead generator is just something that you give people for free in exchange for their email address. This can be a lot of different things. You can make a white paper. You can actually, now with Canva, you can make that look a lot better pretty quickly. You can also search those Canva designs for ideas for doing a white paper, because they always have to have fake content, and the fake content are pretty good ideas for a white paper or for a PDF download. I've also seen more people now sharing a Google Doc setup or a spreadsheet that they have they're like, I've dialed this in, I have the spreadsheet set up, and then you take the content, take the data out, and then offer that for free. And so that's a pretty easy lead generator. And then also a discount or a coupon is good. But with all of these things, keep in mind that your lead generator should be worth at least $5. Somebody giving you their email, unless it's their junk email, which is not what we're trying to get, someone needs something of value to give you their real email. So the $5 mark has been really helpful for me. And I did hear that before inflation. So you can say $5, $7, $10, but somewhere in that is a sweet spot of kind of what you want your lead generator to be worth. Okay, so here's some lead generator ideas and some things that, the other side will be things that I have tried. So you could do a free guide, an email course, you can do a quiz, an industry report. One of the things that's worked really well for Infomedia in the past is 50 questions to ask your website company, but you can kind of play with that. Templates, like we said, bonus content, or you could, if you're better in person, you can do a free Zoom or something like that and say to get a link to join, we'll give you this in exchange for your email. So there are a lot of different things you can play with. I would start with the things that you offer, the things that people seem interested in your friends and family seem interested in, that your customers seem interested in. See if you can do a download around those. So I've tried a lot of lead generators. They all worked. Some of them took a lot more work from me than they should. I have a really bad habit of creating lead generators that are probably more in the $25, $30 range and then giving them away for free. So one example of that is that I have a quiz. The quiz is still live at carrierollwagon.com. It's a pop-up, you can take the quiz. But like I wrote a quiz, it divides you into different categories, like a solopreneur or a freelancer, all the way to somebody who has a small business that's been open more than 5 years. And then you get results of that quiz delivered to your email. And I put like everything in this. It's just like for freelancers or for wherever you are, it's like book recommendations, a pep talk, there's a workout. Like, what was I doing? Like there is so much in here. And that was the problem for me, is that I put so much into delivering this that yes, I got signups, and I still do sometimes, but it's not necessarily worth the work that I put into it. You can make it worth the work if you go to the pop-up just kidding. You can do whatever you want. I also did one for coffee shops in Birmingham. So I used to own a coffee shop. I thought this would be easy. I was like, I'm going to do it right this time. I'm just going to send a Google form to all the independent coffee shops about things like, do you have vegan options? What's your parking lot? Do you have outlets? Like all the things that you want to know about a coffee shop. Well, I forgot that O. Henry's and Santos are local coffee shops that have approximately 1,000 locations apiece. So, so we did it. Elena helped me on this. We did it, but it was a lot. And it worked. I got signups, but again, not necessarily to the extent of the work I put in. A better example is that we did a podcast download, and she helped me on this too, but I did a talk here about podcasting, and it was more focused on content. And we weren't really talking about equipment and really tips for that. But I had an email. I've been podcasting in some form since like 2015, so a lot of people ask me about podcasting. So I have my go-to email that's like, here's what I recommend, here's the benefits of XYZ. So we just put that information into a PDF. I already had the information. So that one worked really well because I did get good signups for that. It worked as a lead generator, but I didn't have to put a ton of effort into creating it. So that's the kind of thing that I would think about. Like, do you already have something that you give your clients or that people ask you all the time? Could you change that into a lead generator? I don't want to get super into the weeds with platforms because there are so many platforms and they all do a decent job probably. MailChimp and Constant Contact are the ones that a lot of people use, and those are pretty solid. I think they both have free versions, but you do get into the paid version pretty soon. Now, if you're doing something different, I did want to mention Substack. So if your newsletter is your product and you're wanting people to pay just to get your newsletter, Substack is something you may want to look into because that's what it's designed for. You can do free emails through Substack, but you can also have subscriptions. Or if you want a newsletter that's better designed, I probably wouldn't use MailChimp. It's a nightmare. But I do use MailChimp, but it's hard. But if you are really getting into design, what we do at Infomedia is we design with Figma, and then we port that over to MailChimp. So MailChimp is still doing the delivery, but we have a better design. So that is an option. That one is not very user-friendly, so that is something you probably want to call Infomedia and say like, hey, how do we do this? But the other ones you can kind of figure out on your own. Frequency is just, I would say base your frequency on how often do you think you can create good content. If it's weekly, that's great, but if it's monthly, that's fine. I really like to stick to a newsletter schedule, but I have found that the people who are getting my newsletter don't really care. It's good for me because I'm a pretty routine-based person, and I feel like if I miss a week, I'm gonna miss 3 weeks. So I like to still keep that. And in general, consistency is good, but this isn't something that somebody's generally speaking, unless you, like Tim Ferriss's newsletter is called 5 Bullet Friday. If he is not sitting that on Friday, it's probably obvious, but for most of us, this is probably fine. Okay, one thing that really stopped me from doing a newsletter for a long time was not knowing if I should start a blog or starting a newsletter. So at the time, Google really prioritized frequency. And I was like, I don't have time to do a blog every week and a newsletter every week, and I couldn't decide what to do. Now that's a little different because Google really wants to have a really long, fleshed out blog, and they're not as concerned about frequency. So you don't have to worry too much about that, but I did want to go through really quickly like what might be better for a blog and what's better for a newsletter. So if you're trying to get organic traffic to your website, good luck to you. But also, just kidding, it's just hard now. But if you're wanting to get some SEO value from this, it needs to be on your website. You're not going to get SEO value from a newsletter. If you are wanting to keep your customers loyal or ask for referrals, a newsletter is better for that. If you're tired of fighting with the algorithm or with Google's changes, a newsletter is a lot more, it's less likely to change all the time. If you want information available to everyone, and what I mean by that is like you're having an event. Like this event, I wouldn't want to only send out in a newsletter because other people can't access that information. It really should be in both, but if you're trying to choose one, it needs to be on the blog over the newsletter. Building an audience, I would say either one. It just depends on how you want to build an audience. If you're wanting to get into trying to use organic growth and trying to build it like draw people in through a website and that kind of thing, a blog's the way to go. But if you're saying like, I'm fine doing a lead generator once a quarter to try to build this list, and then I want to keep the loyalty that way, a newsletter might be better. If you have evergreen content that people are still going to want to access in a year or 3 years, I would make sure it's on your blog, even if you do send it on the newsletter. But if it's something that's going to expire, like you can pre-order this book, you could probably send that through your newsletter. You don't need that on your blog in 3 years. And then long form, probably think blog, and short form, probably think newsletter. But your blog and newsletter can and should work together. So you could include a snippet of information in the newsletter and link to your blog. Like I said, I wouldn't just send an email that says, here is a blog, but if you take an excerpt from that same thing and say, read more on the blog, that's fine. You don't necessarily have to rewrite all the content. You can blog about the topic and then say, I'm sending out, a special series in this on my newsletter, so sign up for my newsletter. And you can and should do some promos to your blog or your podcast or whatever you're doing in your newsletter. And you can also reuse this content. So a good example of this for us is on the Localist podcast, my team came to me and said we wanted to do some short episodes, like some 10 or 15 minute episodes people could listen to in their car and doing dishes or whatever. And I was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to come up with more stuff to say, And they said, just use your newsletter. And that's what we're doing. Now, I'm not saying in the same week, I'm not on the same time saying the same exact thing and just reading it on the podcast. That would be boring and punish people for following me in both. But I'm taking newsletters I wrote a year ago and remixing them just a little bit for the podcast, and that's so much easier than starting from scratch. You can also do this same thing. Use your newsletter for, do rewrite it. Don't just copy and paste, but you can make LinkedIn posts out of it. You can make, expand on it more and do a blog article or do a reel. You may not have a podcast, but a reel is basically a short podcast. It could be. So you can use it there or just wherever you're using it. Once you have spent the time to develop this newsletter, think about how can I kind of remix this content and get more out of it. And finally, please sign up for my newsletter. You can scan this QR code, or it's also at carrierollwagon.com. That pop-up comes up. There are sign-ups there and sign-ups on my Instagram. I hate being the self-promotional, but I feel like it's part of the talk, so... all right, question.
One quick question is brought to you by Infomedia. Infomedia is a web service company. So that means we can do whatever you need for your website or your digital marketing, from your email marketing to your website, to photos, to copy, and more. We want to be here to help you in whatever you need for your website or your digital presence. If you'd like to meet with us, head to infomedia.com and fill out that contact form. Let us know what you need. We would love to help. One Quick Question is developed and hosted by me, Carrie Rollwagon. You can find show notes, including links to what we talk about on the podcast today, at infomedia.com/quickquestion. Our producer is Elena Harmond. Our theme music is by Brad Davis, and our sound engineering is done in our in-house podcasting studio. If you're interested in a podcast, we can help you out with that too, by the way. If you need website support, marketing advice, or you're interested in a new website, give us a call at 205-823-4440 or email quickquestion@infomedia.com. And I'll leave you with this thought. A real expert helps to clarify, not confuse. So don't take website advice from someone who can't give you a straight answer.